Hello everyone, this is Ray Savage from Cambium Networks. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar on the PMP 450i at 900 megahertz. The presentation is being recorded and it will be sent out to all attendees, and you will be able to see it on the Cambium community sometime later today. But during the course of the presentation, if you do have any questions, please use the question and answer dialog box on the right-hand side of your screen. Our presenters today are Matt Mangriotis, who is the Global Product Manager. Who is the Global Product Manager for PMP Systems. And today we're joined by our special guest, Mr. Dustin Stock, who is the lead engineer for Aristotle.net, and he'll be sharing a lot of his field information. So without any further ado, Matt, I'd like to turn it over to you.
Good morning. Again, my name is Matt Mangriotis. I'm the product manager for the 450 platform series of products. And I'm excited today to talk to you guys again about the 450i 900 megahertz product that was recently launched late last year. And most folks who have ordered initial shipments of this have received it, and we're getting lots of good feedback about the product, and this is very exciting stuff. So without further ado, let's go into this. For those of you who have attended the previous webinar on the 900 product, some of these slides may be a bit redundant, but I want to make sure we introduce the product line for those that haven't seen it before, and then we'll get into the meat and potatoes, or the results from some of the customers that have used this product so far, which I think will be pretty enlightening. So just to introduce the product line in general, and why we're here, basically. Why is Cambium doing what we're doing? Really, the PMP 100 product, the 900 megahertz product that we released about 12 years ago, is continuing to work, and work fairly well for a lot of customers. It's low data rates, but it's very reliable. It gives you consistent throughput up to about 4 megs per second per sector, which is not enough. It's just not enough for today's demands. Customers expect and demand a lot more throughput, and so we're just running out of gas. We've run out of gas probably many years ago on what the limits of that technology can do. So we've faced the need to migrate to newer technologies, and with the advent of the 450i platform, we're now able to take this to the next level and push much higher capacity over the same kind of links. So basically, what it looks like in terms of architecture, very simple flat architecture, same as our existing platform, but it's with the 450i. You have base stations, or APs, access points, in a cluster. You can have lots of them at the same site due to our synchronization, and then those connect to a subscriber module through the air, and the subscriber module is usually located on a home or premise, customer premise, which has a single Ethernet cable that goes into the home. We also offer the CN Pilot devices inside the home to provide local Wi-Fi as an add-on service, as well as phone and VoIP services. So what did we try to do with the 450i product? It's the path to higher throughput for those tough-to-reach customers. Really, the 900 megahertz spectrum is not one that's often looked at first. There are other areas of unlicensed spectrum that have much more availability in terms of megahertz. There's much more frequency available to play with, but 900 penetrates well. It's really the spectrum of last resort, if you will. So many customers that cannot achieve a link using other types of spectrum, you resort to 900 megahertz to get that link completed. It allows you to increase your coverage. You can connect those tough to connect customers or difficult links, and with the 450i now you can provide more throughput to those guys. So it's a redesigned radio. Really, we're increasing the performance based on the 450i platform. We've made significant advances to the platform. We have a 450i product in the 5 gigahertz range as well, and we are planning to do it in 3 gigahertz as well later this year. So we're moving forward with the platform advancements and moving to a 450i. With 900, you're improving your range and coverage. You can make those near and non-line of sight links. The propagation is really good. I'll talk a little bit more in detail about why that is with 900 megahertz. It's a rugged enclosure now. We use industrial rated components. For the AP, it's an IP6667 ingress protection rating for harsh environments, so it's completely weather sealed and waterproof. And on the SM side, we've made it very clean installation. You attach that SM directly to that Yagi antenna that we sell, and it's a great little assembly that's very easy to do. And you'll see some of the pictures of customers using it. It's a very nice and easy to handle type of assembly. We've updated the FPGA. So everything we do is software based and done in an FPGA. It's now a system on a chip, if you will, which triples the processing power compared to even the 450. And it's really an order of magnitude better than the PMP 100 in terms of processing power. This allows us to do many more things with the feature set, as well as just simply being much better in terms of PPS and processing packets. We did add that second Ethernet port on the access point as well to allow multiple functions, such as GPS timing in and out, the alignment tone, or you can add a camera and support it with PoE output as well. And due to all these things on the access point side, we've changed the power scheme to support PoE standard, the 8023AT power on the AP side. However, we kept the existing power supplies available for the SM side. So we can use those existing canopy style 30-volt DC power supplies on the SM. So here's a look at the devices. The SM is the one on the right, and the AP is the one to the left. It operates across that whole ISM band. This is mostly used in North America, and that's the unlicensed 902 to 928 band. There are pockets around the world where this spectrum is unlicensed as well, and we are supporting those pockets around the world. And if you are unsure whether you can use it in your area, please inquire, and we'll be happy to respond. We support 5, 7, 10, or 20 meg channels across of those frequencies. It's a 2x2 MIMO design, so we are doing a dual slant MIMO system to enable more throughput. Again, new power scheme on the AP side, but the SMs can reuse the existing power supplies, the 30-volt power supplies. We're utilizing that new architecture with advanced PPS capabilities, and we're maximizing spectral efficiency by employing the GPS timing and co-location with existing PMP 100 products that are out there. The design goals of this were really to improve throughput, and what we found is that under similar RF conditions, meaning high noise floor, interference-prone areas, tough to make links, we're able to do 3 to 4 times the amount of throughput that the PMP 100 was able to do, which you're moving from about 4 megs to about 12 to 15 or 16 megs. In clean spectrum, if you have that spectrum available, if you can do a 20 meg channel, you can certainly provide more than 100 megs per sector.
Matt, we did have one question come in, and it was about, are there any plans to add 2.4 gigahertz spectrum to the 450i platform?
We have the 2.4 product in 450. We don't have any plans yet to do 450i version of 2.4. And that simply, so far, has been a market-driven decision. The market for 2.4 is restricted to North America as well in terms of outdoor support for 2.4. Most places around the world do not allow 2.4 to be used outdoors. So that's been a marketing or a market-driven decision, business decision. So not yet. We don't have plans, but it is a band spin that could be done fairly easily if the market should present itself.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So in terms of migration, we really designed this product to be able to help you migrate from the PMP 100 products over to the 450i products with the minimum amount of pain. And it can be done in a phased approach. It can be a migration to the new products, or you can use them as a permanent solution, co-locating them. They don't interoperate, but they can co-locate. And what we're doing is providing a strategy to do one site at a time versus the entire network having to change over at once. Really, we need to make sure that all the system parameters are selected to minimize the interference. And we provide a tool, co-location or migration tool, to determine those optimal parameters. And it's critical. It's critical that you do this because if you're operating in 900 megahertz, there's not that much spectrum to play with, but both are using TDD systems, and if they're not synchronized, you will be stepping on each other and causing interference for both systems. When they're synchronized, they can operate and co-locate without causing interference and allowing you to use more of the available spectrum. The tools and the strategy guide, which is a white paper that can be downloaded, are available at that link below on the support site for 450i. So some of the considerations we made when designing this system, a lot of it has to do with the antennas. So I want to spend a minute pointing out the importance of the antenna design and the fact that these antennas that we've designed for this system are not the only antennas you can use. Both the access point and connectorized, and SM are connectorized, so you can put whatever antennas you'd like on there. But keep in mind that the antennas that we sell are optimized for this system. They're dual slant polarization, which affords you a little bit of isolation against both vertical and horizontal antennas, which are typically what's used out there for other systems, including the smart grid and meter reading type of SCADA systems that are existing. So this dual slant provides some isolation against either vertical or horizontal. And the other very important fact of these antennas is that the high front-to-back ratio allows that frequency reuse and the ability to use the entire spectrum. On the Yagi side, it's about 41 inches in length, which is not super long, but it does provide 12 dB of gain. So it's not a bad antenna. And as you can see there in the picture, those cables come right off the antenna and hook right onto the top of the RP SMA connectors on top of the SM. And on the AP side, it's about 3 feet tall and 11 inches wide. So it's not a huge antenna, but it provides a very high front-to-back ratio across the entire back lobe of the antenna, which allows you to do that frequency reuse. It's a 65-degree 3 dB roll-off antenna that can be used for either a 60 or a 90-degree sector.
Okay, Matt, I know you touched on this, but you might want to just go through it again for emphasis. Is it possible to co-locate a 450i 900 where you already have a PMP 100 900 megahertz?
Absolutely. So that's part of the migration strategy, is taking those existing PMP 100 sectors, and if you can swap one sector at a time, it can be done. The ideal scenario would be to swap a site at a time, but certainly you can co-locate the two using the migration tool and migration strategy guide that we provide on the website. That is the intent, is that we'll be able to co-locate them. They cannot interoperate. Let me make that point one more time. We cannot connect an 450i access point to a PMP 100 subscriber. We cannot do that. But we can co-locate the two systems so that they minimize the interference between them.
Okay, another question that we had that came in, are there any plans for a 17 dBi antenna?
Not at this time. The propagation characteristics of the 900 product are pretty good, so you do get extended distance and range even with these 12 and 13 dBi antennas. With a 17 dBi antenna, you're talking about 6.5 feet long in terms of the Yagi, and so we haven't explored that just yet. If there is a strong demand for that, we certainly could consider that. Keep in mind there are other antenna manufacturers that have seen the benefits of this 900 product and are working on third-party, if you will, antennas that can support these products. So I know of at least 2 or 3 other antenna manufacturers that are working to design products that could meet those needs, including a very large gain antenna, high gain antenna.
Right, and I know you mentioned that the Yagi antenna includes the cabling that goes directly to the SM. We just had a question, do these include the mounts also?
Yeah, so what you see in this picture on this slide is included with the antenna, aside from the radio. So the radio is separate, but all the mounting and adapter kits to make the radio connect to the antenna are included with the antenna. So everything is included when you buy it. The only thing that would be separate would be the N-type cables that you see on the access point side on the right-hand side. Those N-type cables are sold separately.
Excellent. Thank you. Let's move on.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit about the performance. In the lab, performance looks like this. The graph, what we're showing here is a in terms of a 7 megahertz channel, it's what we call a waterfall curve. And what we're showing here is based on the various channel sizes or channel bandwidth. These are kind of the modulation coding scheme steps depending on the received signal level. So your throughput, you can see you can achieve about 130 megs of throughput in a 20 meg channel at the highest modulation. And that highest modulation will last all the way up to about minus 68 or so QAM of modulation in a 20 megahertz channel. So it's a pretty impressive amount of throughput you can get if you have a clean channel and a strong signal. Now, of course, as I mentioned before, 900 megahertz, typically you're not doing this in a clean channel and a line of sight type of deployment that's close. Typically, if you're doing that, you'd use another frequency where you have more flexibility with the frequencies you can choose. With 7 meg channels, you can see the table on the right, the various modulations in terms of sensitivity, and then the throughput you can achieve. So even at QPSK, which is the lowest modulation we support, you get about 6 megs of throughput down to minus 95 sensitivity. It's a very impressive, from a system level, very impressive link that can go quite a long distance. As you can see in the bottom, if you do have line of sight, even using the 12 dBi Yagi antenna in a 7 megahertz channel, you can do about 100 miles away or more. So it's a very impressive in terms of range and throughput, even with the 12 dBi antenna.
Great, and okay.
So in terms of testing out in the initial testing, we did some parking lot testing, if you will, where we took it outside for the first time, and we just set it up side by side with a 5 gigahertz radio. And really, I just want to make the point that the penetration of the frequency itself is dependent on physics. So the 900 megahertz product has a 13-inch wavelength, just in terms of the frequency and wavelength of this radio signal. It's about a 13-inch wavelength, which penetrates trees. 5 gig, as you go up in frequency, the wavelength becomes smaller and gets blocked more easily by obstacles. So side by side, 900 versus 5 gig, the 5 gig signal was attenuated by about 30 dB, whereas the 900 megahertz signal was only attenuated by 2. So this is just simple physics, but it brings to bear a good point on the ability to have various tools in your toolbox to get the job done. So if you need to go through trees and you cannot connect the customer with your standard types of unlicensed frequencies like 5 gig or 3 gig, 900 may work where others do not. And then in terms of the testing across various interference levels, which is also a very, very important point in North America, we have areas of very high interference due to smart grid, SCADA, other types of data collection that are using the 900 megahertz spectrum. So in terms of that, if you have low interference, which is to the right of the graph, your comparison against FSK, what we're showing here is two lines. The red line is the 20 megahertz channel of 450i, and the green line is the more likely used case, where you're using a 7 megahertz channel. The PMP 100 uses an 8 megahertz channel, so this is kind of analogous to that. But in a low interference situation, you're about 10 times the amount of throughput as the 100. So you can get up to about 40, 45 megs of throughput if you have a good signal-to-noise ratio. Now, as it gets worse, interference gets higher, you can see that it maintains still about 3 times the amount of throughput as the FSK. So you're talking 12 or 14 megs of throughput. Now, that area that's shaded in the blue circle is an area where the FSK no longer connects, but 450i maintains that stable link even at the lowest modulation. So you're able to do things that you couldn't do even with the PMP 100. So in the beginning, we had some early feedback where we had a high noise environment. You can see the spectrum analysis graph on the bottom, and those error bars, if you will, are showing peaks of above minus 50 noise floor. And with the PMP 100, this customer was getting high latency, high jitter, about 1 meg throughput through that link, but then replacing that with the 450i product with a 5 megahertz channel. So we're able to we have more flexibility, and we're able to go to an even smaller channel. But even with that smaller channel, we were able to achieve about 5 megs of total throughput. So about 5 times the throughput in a smaller channel. So that was just one example. And then at this point, I think I'd like to turn it over to Dustin to kind of explain his experience. He's with Aristotle. And why don't you introduce yourself, Dustin, and go ahead and talk through your experience with the 900 product, so they don't just hear from Cambium, but they hear from an actual customer who's tried this.
All right. Hello, guys. I'm Dustin Stock with Aristotle. We're located in Little Rock, Arkansas. I know some of you attending this might know me, some of you don't. But here in Arkansas, we have Delta land on the east side, and we have tons and tons of trees and hills everywhere else. And we're located where all the trees and hills are. And south of Little Rock, we have 7 900 sites. The one we tested around has 5 900 Cambium APs. So all that frequency is just loaded. And we've got about 400 customers on this 900 stuff, and they're all begging for something more than 1 megabyte, which I know you guys are more than familiar with. So we got the beta test from Cambium, and we took it and put it on the south side of the tower where we have most of our customers. So we went about 3/4 mile away, and I did a speed test and was pulling 35 down and like 7 up on a 7 megahertz channel. We were like, wow, that is amazing. And then I tested on the 5 megahertz channel and the 7 megahertz channel and the 10 megahertz channel. 20 completely out of the question because of the interference. But the speeds that we saw with non-line of sight were amazing. Next slide, please. We went to a second location as a previous customer. He has it up on his storage shed. He's about a mile and a quarter away. Through trees, we were seeing 27 meg aggregate. So 22 down, almost 5 megs up. And remember, this is a high noise area because our tower is completely loaded down. And then we swapped to 7 megahertz, 17 megs aggregate, and then 5 megahertz, 15 megs aggregate. This is amazing. Next slide, please. Then we went to a third location that was down in a hole. We actually tested the 365, 450 stuff also in this area. And with 900 at this location, didn't get a single bit of a connection at all. Couldn't see our AP, couldn't see anything. Tried the 365, of course, that didn't work out. So we brought the 450i 900 here. It picked up the AP and connected, neg 88, and still had almost 2.5 meg aggregate connection. So almost 2 down and 1 up. So this is like perfect stuff for heavily wooded areas. Even with a high interference level, it seems to work really, really good.
So that was a pretty good summary of your experience. Did you have any areas where you had PMP 100 connected at 900 megahertz and then used the 450i? You said this one didn't connect, this last one, but were there any areas where you had them running side by side?
The second site where we had a customer at, that customer is connected in the neg 65, 70 range, and on the new 450i it was at neg 58.
Great. So that kind of explains a little bit of the difference in terms of the RSSI levels that you can pull with one product versus the other. Well, thanks a lot, Dustin. I appreciate you spending time with us. And I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the other customers that have fed back some information. And then if we have any more questions for you, I'd appreciate it if you'd stay on the line, and then we'll ask you at the end. Is that cool?
Most certainly.
All right. Thanks, Dustin.
You're welcome.
Some other feedback from Ben down in southern Illinois with Royale Communications. He's in also a heavily wooded area, and he's had several customers move to the 450i product, and things have been running really well. So he's given us that feedback. North Coast Wireless, Matt over in Ohio, did a lot of testing for us early on, and he's pretty impressed with how it's going out here. It's performing well. He did some parking lot testing, which kind of He said it was jaw-dropping, and he's got nothing to complain about, really. He's really happy with how things are going. Actually, Matt's been working a little bit with the zero-touch configuration feature as well, which I did a webinar on about a month ago. It's available to take a look at on our community site as well. And Matt's working on deploying with the zero-touch as well to make deployment even easier. And then there was a couple of folks that posted some experiences over on the Animal Farm forum, if you will, and they've done some testing. And this is not beta testing. This is actual equipment that they've purchased and done some testing with. A couple of examples. Ken's got about 6 times improvement over what he had with FSK. You can read through the commentary, which I've kind of copied verbatim into the slide. But he had a couple different sites, one with more line of sight than the other, one with higher interference than the other. But he's pretty impressed and has about a 6x improvement over what he's getting with FSK. So good news there. He's also in Illinois, west and south of Chicago. And then Matt Howard over at Lightwire. He's got some 900 450i, and so far impressed. He thinks it's going to be usable in some areas where other products just can't make it. And so there's lots of experiences and customer feedback that are lending to the fact that this product does what we expect it to do, and maybe the opportunity to connect customers that you otherwise couldn't connect. So that's pretty much it as far as experiences go. Turn it over to Ray here.
Okay, thanks, Matt. You can always find out the latest information on Cambium Networks. You can follow us on social media, whether it's Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, Google+, or Weibo. And as Matt had mentioned, we also have our community forum, which is a free information area. It's community.cambiumnetworks.com, and there you'll find information on the 450i and all of our other products, how to do network planning with Link Planner. We have areas in different languages, and we also cover business issues. In addition, you can submit your development ideas, and there are real-world connectivity stories in the Your Stories section. And we'd also encourage people, now you can post links to your own videos and post those on our community. So Matt and Dustin, we do have a number of questions here. First off, Matt, how soon will the 450i at 900 megahertz be readily available?
So at the end of the year, we had a lot of demand, and we were catching up with supply. That should be completely caught up to our channel folks during the month of January here. So if you've placed orders, you should be receiving equipment very shortly if you haven't already. And we're going to be completely caught up, we believe, before the end of the month. And so feel free to place orders on your reseller, and they'll have stuff in hand, hopefully before the end of the month.
Thank you. Obviously, it's cold in Chicago today. Question here from a network operator is that single-pole Yagi antennas are highly affected by snow and ice. How does your antenna cope with snow and ice?
Well, it is subject to problems with snow and ice, just as any other large structure outdoors might be. So yes, Yagis are susceptible to that sort of thing. As I mentioned, there are some other antenna manufacturers working toward developing solutions, including things like a dual slant flat panel antenna that may be an option for you if you are unwilling to try a Yagi because of the snow and ice buildup. There are also some wrappers or covers that I've seen in third parties that could be used to cover that antenna without affecting the RF signal to maybe shed ice a little bit better. But yes, there are some potential issues with that as well.
Okay. Here's one about the coexisting capabilities that you mentioned earlier. Somebody has 360-degree coverage of a 450i AP. Can that coexist with a PMP 100 FSK AP to provide 2 layers of service off the same tower?
So that may be very difficult to do, and that's because there's only 26 megahertz of spectrum available. With a PMP 100, there's no choices in terms of channel bandwidth. That product uses an 8 meg channel, and so typically you have 3 channels available to you, and with our system of frequency reuse, if you're doing a 360-degree coverage, typically it's deployed as ABC, ABC, where you're reusing a frequency back-to-back. So you have 3 different frequencies, and typically it's 907, 915, and 924, or 922, something like that. And then those are used in a back-to-back fashion. And when you go to add the 450i, you need to take down at least one of those sectors to replace it with 450i. Now, with 450i, you can certainly do smaller channels and spread your frequencies a little bit more, because we do support a 5 meg channel in there as well. So there's lots of options, and the migration strategy document does take you through a bunch of different options. But as far as doing 2 tiers in that limited spectrum, I think that would be a very difficult proposition.
Okay, thanks. And Dustin, here's a question for you. They were asking in both cases, in the 3 cases where you were testing with Aristotle.net, did you use a Yagi antenna in each of those cases?
We did use a Yagi in every location.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Matt, the next one is about total throughput. What's the total throughput available for a 5 megahertz and a 7 megahertz channel? And I know it's going to get right back to physics.
Yeah, absolutely. Depending on the modulation level that you can achieve up to the maximum throughput per channel size. And this is the same across all the 450 product platform. In a 20 meg channel, you can do upwards of 100 megs, typically around 130 or so. And typically with 900, you're using a 5 millisecond frame. So there's a little bit more throughput available for you because the frame is packed in a more optimal manner. As you go down in channel size, obviously that number decreases. Now, if you want to know exact numbers for your deployment, this product is available to select in Link Planner, a free tool that's on our website. And Link Planner will give you, based on your location, you can put in X, Y coordinates, and from Google Maps, you can import a KMZ, know exactly how it's laid out. It'll give you a really good estimate of what you can expect from that link, depending on the channel size, depending on all that stuff. So as in a 5 meg channel, you're talking about 20 megs of data in a maximum, in an optimal scenario. And as you go in bigger channel sizes, that number gets bigger. We can get over 40 megs in a 7 meg channel, about 60 megs in a 10 meg channel, and then, as I said, over 100 in a 20 meg channel, given good conditions, of course.
Okay, the next one is, what about guard band between frequencies? Can you comment on that a little bit?
Sure. With the 450i, there's no guard band needed. With both the 450 and 450i product lines, the radio design is such that the adjacent channel rejection qualities do not require any guard band at all. Now, in the migration document, when you're using PMP 100 and 450, you'll see the recommendations for guard bands in that document, depending on what the scenario is. And with the PMP 100, we always recommended at least 1 megahertz spacing between channels. But with the 450i, you can butt up 4 5 meg channels right against each other, even 5 5 meg channels in that band, and not require any guard band.
Great, and I know you mentioned earlier about the access point antenna having a very strong front-to-back ratio to eliminate interference. The question from this network operator is, how close can you have each sector by one another? Is there a preferred distance, or can they put them literally back-to-back?
In terms of front-to-back, if you're on the same pole, if you will, you can put them front-to-back. In terms of next to each other, you want a minimum separation of at least 2 wavelengths, and in this case, that's about 3 feet. That's the minimum separation you want from side to side, if you will. But front to back, the isolation is pretty darn good, and you can put them on the same pole back to back if that's the deployment scenario that you're looking at. It does work.
Okay. We have a number of our distributors and resellers commenting that they do have stock, so please contact your favorite distributor or reseller, and they'll be more than glad to help you out there. Another question came in. How does the system operate in a high multipath environment? Let's say, for example, in canyons. Is there a maximum delay spread that's specified?
Well, with the 450 and 450i systems, multipath is handled in a very good manner. It's done very well. There's no spread or delay that's specified. You'll have to see what kind of delay you're seeing and see what kind of effect that has on the signal. But 450 typically handles multipath in a very good manner. We do support both MIMO-A, which is the dual payload modulations. I'm sorry, MIMO-B, which is the dual payload modulations, which allow you to do different data on each path. But if the radio can't handle that due to multipath delay spread or interference, it'll actually go to MIMO-A, which would be the single payload, and do the same data on both paths, thereby allowing you to recreate that signal on the other end in a much better manner at the expense of throughput. So it can certainly handle multipath in a good way.
Okay, here's a network operator who's looking to take the next step and get into the design phase. His question is, what's the best place for the antenna? Do we go from the high ground shooting to low ground, or will the reverse work? Can a flat line work? And I think this is where Link Planner comes into play.
Absolutely. So in Link Planner, the height of the deployments are taken into account, as well as clutter and terrain data. So it can work in either of those scenarios. Our mounting schemes are such that you can certainly adjust for that. And so there's no real rule of thumb. It's really whatever provides you with the best signal. So it can work in a flat plane. It can work from low to high and high to low.
Okay, another network operator sees the typical expectation for your upload speeds versus your download speeds. He notices that there's quite a difference between upload and download. Can you comment on that?
Certainly. With the 450 platform, as with many of our other platforms, the duty cycle, or the uplink and downlink ratio, can be tweaked to whatever your needs are as an operator. And so we can go all the way from 85% downlink to 15% downlink, and provide your customers with whatever is needed. Now that said, the duty cycle is typically kind of, you want to match what you're doing with your co-located network. And typically for residential service providers and internet service provider, you're going to want more heavy on the downlink. So that's typically what we're seeing, and that's what Dustin showed. He had a heavier downlink because he's trying to provide his customer with the ability to download faster versus high upload.
Right.
Okay, and this one kind of follows along on that. Can you select only certain modulation rates by forcing the adaptive layer to use only defined modulation rates? All you can do is really throttle the uplink and the downlink. Is that correct?
Yeah, we don't allow you to select specific coding schemes. The radio is optimized, meaning the software algorithms will determine what the best modulation that it can operate in and provide error-free transmissions. So if the radio experiences retransmits of any fragments during its cycle, it'll modulate to another modulation that will provide better success rates. So the radio handles all that itself. It's dynamic, and it's very, very fast. So we don't experience any issues with locking modulation rates. The radio will handle that on its own.
Okay. And again, another network design question about how many clients per access point can we expect? And that's a business issue, it's a design issue.
Absolutely. So given the conditions that you're in, we support, as a system, we support up to 238 clients per access point. That's the most we can do. But typically, especially with 900, if you're restricted on bandwidth, if you're restricted on line of sight, you got to look at what your maximum sector capacity is, and then decide how much you're willing to give to each client on that site. So that's really, again, a business decision based on what your oversubscription rates you can tolerate, what's your busy hour, what's your guaranteed level of performance. All of those things are factors in that. So typically with 900, we see some folks do 10 subscribers, some folks do 50. We've seen folks on a 10 meg channel or a 20 meg channel do over 100 subscribers. But it really depends on your business conditions and what you decide to do for your customers.
Right, and the AP throughput performance is highly dependent on the noise. It's highly dependent on the environment. So that's one of the factors you also have to include.
Absolutely.
Okay, there was a question here about wiring the power supply and also the CMM. Is there any information where we can point somebody to get all the details on that?
Sure. The portfolio actually just had a recent change in terms of power supplies on the CMM side of things. There's some notifications and there's an application note, and the user guides are being updated to reflect that. With this product line, one of the tricks is that the access point uses the 56-volt power supply, and that's a PoE style power supply, 8023AT, which means to connect it to a CMM4, you will need to look at the wiring of that Ethernet cable. We sell an adapter that makes the pin swap easy, but you can also look in the user guide because it explains how to make this swap on the cable. So that's the AP side. The AP requires 56-volt DC. The SM side utilizes the Canopy 30-volt DC style power supply. So it uses the similar power that the PMP 450 subscriber modules use, as well as the PMP 100 subscriber modules. So they are different between the two. That's an important point.
Okay, we had another question about design, network design, and it really takes a look at how much frequency you have available and how many sectors you want to do. Sometimes you might want to go with more sectors using a lower frequency band. These are all decisions that you have to make when you're designing the network.
Yeah, as a rule of thumb, I mean, you need to see how much coverage you want at a given site. Do you want 360 degrees? Are you only pointing in one direction? Depending on what your coverage model is, you can decide what kind of channel bandwidth you can support. Rule of thumb is choose the widest channel that works the best for you. So if you need to hit a guy that's 20 miles away, you may not want a 20 meg channel because the narrower channels have better penetration or better sensitivity, so you can go farther with a 5 meg channel than you can with a 20 meg channel. Again, this goes back to physics and power density, but it really it helps determine what your business model is going to look like. Now that said, Link Planner, we have a couple tools. I'm going to mention Link Planner again because it's a great tool to put in your estimated client site as well as your tower site and see what you can expect in terms of throughput and given a specific channel size. And you can twist the knobs and pull with the levers to get where you want to be. We also have a tool called the Link Capacity Planner tool that's available on the website. It's basically an Excel table with some macros built in that can allow you to do it in a simpler manner and give you kind of a snapshot of what you can expect from a throughput from a sector level. You can input several SMs and see what the capacity of that sector would be given those SM locations.
And if you have any questions on Link Planner, just last week we did a detailed webinar with Rachel Swindell walking through Link Planner for the first time, including PMP 450i. So that is available on the community, no charge. You can go ahead and take a look at that webinar. And if you have any questions on that, just post those right to the thread right there on the community. Matt, we did have a question about the CMM5.
So we do have a next generation, if you will, CMM under development, and we're expecting that around mid-year. That's the target for release. You'll hear more about that in the future. I don't have a lot of details on that today. So yeah, keep us in mind for that.
Okay, and then you were talking about the power supply at the AP. The question is that a similar 55-volt power supply to what people have seen before with our old PMP 320?
So not quite. So the old 56-volt power supply that was provided to supply power to the PMP 320 and PMP 430 APs was proprietary power pinout, if you will. It was 56 volts, but it was a proprietary pinout. now we've moved to the PoE standard of 8023AT. So you can use any 8023AT standard PoE to power these access points, but you to go through the CMM, you need to make that pin swap, and that's what the one trick is that you need to look in the user guide and make sure we're doing that pin swap. Now, as far as powering it from switches, if it's 8023AT capable, absolutely, they can power these devices and switch right through there.
Great, and one comment on RSSI, FSK versus PMP 450i. Can you comment a little bit on that?
Well, in the 450i, we have many more modulation levels that are supported. In FSK, you really have 2x and 1x FSK modulation. And so the RSSI tables, you can look them up in the user guide if you want, but we do support a better, we go lower, if you will. There's better sensitivity in the lower modulations on the 450i, which is why we can connect better and stay connected longer than we can on the FSK.
Okay, we did have one question on side lobes of coverage areas. Can 390-degree sectors cover 360 degrees when you're very close in?
Well, so the sector antenna is actually a 65-degree 3 dB roll-off. And typically, if you want maximum coverage, and I know that's not what you're asking here, but if you want maximum coverage, you would want to use 6 sectors to do that. We would otherwise recommend a 4-sector deployment to cover those 90-degree sectors. And within 3 miles, certainly that would be adequate. To do a 3-sector deployment, I think you're going to miss out on some of those in-between guys. You can take a look at the patterns. They're on the access point sector antenna spec sheet, which is available online as well. You can take a look at the patterns and see if that works for you. But I think you might be missing out on those in-betweens if you try to do a 3-sector deployment with the 65-degree antenna that we provide.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Matt. Thank you, Dustin, for sharing your field information. We look forward to seeing everybody on future webinars. This session has been recorded, and it should be up on the community later today. And if you have any additional questions, please feel free to post them on the community. I know that both Dustin and Matt are very active there, and they'll be able to respond to your questions. Thanks, everybody. We look forward to seeing you on future webinars.
Thanks.
Thank you.